This video illustrates the use of data modeling patterns, in this specific case antipatterns. This is part one of a two-video series. I'm Michael Blaha. So an antipattern is a characterization of a software flaw. When you find an antipattern, you substitute the correction. There's two types of antipatterns. There's universal antipatterns that you want to avoid at all times, and there's non-data warehouse antipatterns. These antipatterns you avoid for non-data warehouse applications, but for a data warehouse they're perfectly acceptable to use. So a pattern is a good idea that can be reused. In contrast, an antipattern is a bad idea that you want to make a point of not using. Existing books focus on antipatterns for programming code, but antipatterns also apply to data models, as you'll see in this video. So here's an example of an antipattern. It's a symmetric relationship, and you'll notice I'm using UML notation here for data modeling. So the antipattern example, it's a many relationship on a contract. A contract's related to many other contracts. It's clearly a bona fide UML model, and actually it works quite well for programming, but does not work for relational database. And if you think about it a little bit, the problem is fairly obvious. Many relationship for a related contract, you promote that to a table. So you have many to many, so you have the key for the one side and the key for the other. So what do you have for this many relationship? Contract 1, contract 2. So if you have contract A related to contract B, do you store contract A and contract B? Do you store contract B and then contract A? Do you have two records, contract AB and then contract BA? It's a mess. So if you double store things, that's obviously offensive. If you don't double store them, then you have to search. Is A in the first place? Is in the second place? It's just a mess. And you can sidestep the whole problem for a relational database and actually have a slightly better model if you use the solution to the antipattern, the improved model. So a contract has an optional contract relationship. A contract relationship involves many contracts. So the many contracts could be a pair like A and B. It could be 3 contracts, 4 contracts, whatever. The original model just picks up pairings. The improved model has a group. So a contract relationship is a means for grouping contracts and interchangeable. So you look at the improved model in the database, it's quite straightforward SQL to deal with. You search for a contract, you traverse to contract relationship, which is an inner join, and then you traverse back the contract excluding the one you started with, which is another inner join, and you get the collection of related contracts. So you have a better model and you sidestep the problems. Here's another example of an antipattern, and this is from an actual application. This application had a manager table, a supervisor table, individual contributor table, and the schema was heavy duplication. You had a name for each of them, phone numbers, addresses. It's a mess. And so one problem is you got the duplication of schema, and another problem is who's above a manager. Is it just 3 levels? There's nothing so magical. The model to the right is more flexible. You avoid the duplication of schema. You have an employee record for everything, and the employee is a subordinate who points to a boss. So an individual contributor has a boss who's a supervisor has a boss who's a manager, and everybody has a boss in the corporate hierarchy except for the guy at the top. So once again, the improved model is more concise, more flexible. It's a better approach. Here's an anti-pattern. This one, avoid for operational applications. It's acceptable for data warehouses. So you have an organization record. There's a name of an organization, lawnmower sales, lawnmower profits, tractor sales, tractor profit, snowblower sales, snowblower profit. What's so magical about lawnmower, tractor, and snowblower? There can be more than those 3. There's more than 3 products. What's so magical about sales and profit? There's more than those 2 metrics. If you look at the improved model, it opens up the possible products. It opens up the possible metrics. So the left model has 1 record for an organization. You have all these columns going across. The right model, you have an organization record. And in this particular case, for 1 organizational record, you'd have 6 financial data records for the various combinations in sales and profit versus lawnmower, tractor, snowblower. So the new the improved model is just not so arbitrarily brittle. If you think about it, with information systems, you want to hard code these kinds of dead ends into them, because then you got to turn to the schema, you got to turn to the data, you got to turn to your programming code, and the business people aren't happy. Now, in contrast with the data warehouse, you hard code things like this, because then it's easier to do your queries and do your data analysis. And the analysis queries are complex enough, much less fighting the schema and trying to decipher that. And then also the data warehouse, to the extent you actually change things operationally and you start storing more metrics, well, then you just extend the table. The structure is simpler, so it's less disruptive. Here's a fourth anti-pattern, and you can see here the anti-pattern example actually violates second normal form. So there's an account number for a customer, and the customer name, the customer type, and the status is implied by the account number. And then once you know the account number, you can find the contact person and have the name and the position and the phone flow from that. So the anti-pattern violates second normal form, which is not a good thing to do for operational applications. The improved model honors it. Well, in data warehouses, you routinely violate normal forms because you're trying to simplify the structure. Data warehouses are intended by reading by end users, not writing. The writing's through the periodic data loads that the end user doesn't control. So it's just different trade-offs. So in conclusion, I've explained what an anti-pattern is for data modeling. I've given you several examples of it. And please see part 2, and I'll give you an example where we look at the LDAP standard and we look at some anti-patterns that are manifest in that and look at the consequences of that.